This is the second of two short videos explaining why there is no climate crisis, how atmospheric carbon dioxide levels have little or nothing to do with the Earth's climate, and how the current cult of supposedly catastrophic man-made climate change risks leading the West into making the greatest scientific and economic blunder in human history. These videos are based on my recent book, There is No Climate Crisis, available from Amazon. In this second video, I will describe what is really happening to the Earth's climate. CO2, carbon dioxide, is what's called a trace gas. There is so little of it in our atmosphere that it has to be measured in parts per million. If the atmosphere was a sports stadium with, say, 100,000 seats, then the pre-industrial level of CO2 would be just 30 seats in the stadium. During the last 150 years, the rise of CO2 levels would be the equivalent to adding just 11 seats to the 100,000-seat stadium. Yet, the climate catastrophists want us to believe that this insignificant increase in a trace gas is going to somehow overheat the Earth and wipe out mankind. This is unscientific nonsense. And anyway, CO2 levels are the lowest they have been for around 300 million years. CO2 levels are now about 413 parts per million. For most of the last 300 million years, they have been between 2,000 and 3,000 parts per million. Yet, the Earth didn't overheat, and animal life thrived. The climate catastrophists like to portray CO2 as some kind of poison, but CO2 is essential for plant life. Many food producers using greenhouses install CO2 generators in their greenhouses to raise CO2 levels to above 1,000 parts per million. This results in a 30 to 40% improvement in crop growth. Moreover, rising atmospheric CO2 is causing a greening of the Earth. The main greenhouse gas is water vapor, which accounts for over 90% of the planet's greenhouse gases. Perhaps amusingly, whenever the climate alarmists want to show the supposed terrible atmospheric pollution caused by fossil fuels, they usually use photos of power station cooling towers. The stuff pouring out of these cooling towers is steam, water vapor, and not CO2. Climate alarmists are forever producing charts which seem to prove that the Earth's temperature is rising in tandem with rising atmospheric CO2 levels. But charts like this are more than misleading for at least two reasons. Firstly, you'll know from my previous video that global temperatures were so high in the 1920s and 30s that scientists believe the polar ice caps would melt and sea levels would rise by up to 40 feet. You'll also know that global temperatures fell so much in the 1960s and 70s that scientists thought we were entering a new ice age. But in the latest global temperature charts, scientists have conveniently adjusted global temperatures, removing the scorching heat of the 1920s and 30s and warming up the cold 1960s and 70s. They have done this to make it look like global temperatures have been consistently rising. Secondly, it's possible to produce similar charts supposedly proving just about anything. Here I show rising atmospheric CO2 levels compared to rising life expectancy and rising literacy levels. All three follow a similar trajectory. But I'm not for one moment suggesting that breathing in more CO2 helps you live longer, nor read better. Correlation does not necessarily imply causality. What's really happening is that the Earth's climate is cyclical, with ice ages and interglacials about every 100,000 years. These cyclical ice ages and interglacials are mainly caused by what is called Milankovitch cycles. The Earth's orbit around the Sun varies from almost circular to much more elliptical over about 100,000 years. When the Earth's orbit is more elliptical, it can be more than 10 million miles further away from the Sun, resulting in ice ages. Then there are also shorter cycles which also affect the Earth's climate, such as variations in solar activity and sunspots. In addition, there are weather cycles like El Niño, which also influence our climate. What is truly strange about the climate catastrophists' doomsday cult is that it is happening at a time when a greater proportion of the human population is living in better conditions than at any time in human history. The catastrophists constantly claim that man-made climate change is killing people, but deaths in natural disasters are down by over 90% in the last 100 years. In spite of human population shooting up from around 2 billion in the 1920s to almost 8 billion now, we no longer have millions dying in droughts, the blue circles on the chart, or floods, the yellow circles. The climate catastrophists also tell us that man-made climate change will devastate agriculture, but in reality, yields on all major crops keep increasing. Moreover, until the arrival of COVID-19, human life expectancy was also increasing, and the percent of people living in extreme poverty has plummeted. I could go on. Whatever indicator of human well-being you look at, they all show improvement, and there is no sign of any negative effects from supposedly catastrophic climate change. In spite of there being no evidence of any negative consequences from the natural changes in our climate, the West has embarked on an economically suicidal policy of trying to alter the Earth's climate with pointless net zero CO2 emissions policies. We can already see the results of this. The move away from fossil fuels to supposedly more environmentally friendly renewables has pushed our energy prices to 3 to 4 times the level companies and households in countries like China and India pay. In Germany, for example, there are 7 special taxes and levies put on energy. Then you also have to add on VAT. The West's ever-increasing energy prices are bankrupting our companies, destroying jobs and moving work to countries with lower energy costs. And while the West impoverishes itself as it tries to cut CO2 emissions, the rest of the world is enthusiastically increasing them. This is madness. So, I have one message for the UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson and all the other world leaders and politicians. Please take a couple of hours to read my book, There Is No Climate Crisis. Then stop badgering us with all your climate catastrophist nonsense and stop all your crazy, economically destructive and ultimately futile net zero policies.